Somebody's already here. Oh, I'm gonna pause this. Hi, everybody. Joining us here virtually and live as well, right here from the Martin County Blake Library. Welcome to our latest Water Ambassadors Lunch and Learn webinar. This is our penultimate webinar. Our next one will be, I'll show that in just a second, will be in a couple weeks from now. For those of you who are new to the Water Ambassadors, the Martin County Water Ambassador Program is the stormwater education program for the county. So just to show you, there we go. Can you see that? So this is our next to last webinar for today, and we've got two great speakers today to talk about some recent projects to help restore manatee habitat. I guess one of our previous ones talked about the Manatee Mortalities, as the scientists from Mote Marine Laboratory. So we're going to talk about that was the problem, and today we're going to talk about some of the solutions to habitat loss for manatees. So that's today. Our next one is in a couple weeks, September 27th. And the title of that project is Repurposing Plastic Bottle Caps for Nutrient Removal in the IRL. It's the IRL Indian River Lagoon Bottle Cap Project. So we're looking forward to that as well. We're going to post the registration link in the chat as we get started. So just to go over the guide.
Hold on, Vincent. I want to interrupt real quick. What we don't have on that flyer is we also have a field trip coming up next week on Wednesday, September 21st. So those of you who are local, if you want to actually go visit the stormwater pilot project that Nick talked about last month, he's going to be doing a guided tour of that project. So we'll put that information in the chat also.
Yep, a week from tomorrow. Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. So just to go over some particulars for our webinar today, your microphone is muted, and we'll keep it that way for the majority of the webinar until maybe we get to the Q&A at the end. You can adjust your audio settings right here. If you can see that little green arrow with the caret. Oh, my mouse is over here. There we go. And we do ask if you can stop your video. That does help with the bandwidth with regards to getting everything to play properly over your computer. So another couple things, some controls here. You can see who all is here by clicking on the participants list. And then also we do ask that if you have any questions, you can ask them anytime, but we will save the questions for our speakers until after their presentation is over. So we'll go through all of that at the end. You can play around with your view settings if you'd like. And again, whenever you need to leave, go ahead and you can click that leave meeting button that's shown on the bottom right hand of your screen. So this webinar is being recorded and will be available online on this website that's shown on this slide. We'll post that in the chat as well, so you have a direct link to it. And again, please use the chat feature to ask your questions, and we will cover your questions in order after our speaker presentation. So with that, we'd love to welcome our two speakers today, both from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, Julie Mitchell and Annie Roddenberry. Both of them are scientists with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, and they both work on a wide range of habitat restoration projects, particularly within the Indian River Lagoon. Julie serves on the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program Management Board, and is a key member of our East Central Florida Estuarine Restoration Team. She's originally from Indiana, with that. There are no marine animals out there, only cows. And despite never having been here, Julie decided Florida was the place she wanted to be. She's a graduate of Florida State University with a BS in biology and a master's in marine biology from Nova Southeastern University. And she has over 20 years of experience in environmental resource management, protection, restoration, and climate change planning. Our Ms. Annie Roddenberry is a biologist with the Aquatic Habitat Conservation and Restoration section for FWC, or Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. She is really key in coordinating projects that enhance and restore marine and estuarine and freshwater resources in Northeast Florida, but also down into the Indian River Lagoon as well. Works with a wide variety of partners to plan and implement projects that improve the function of coastal habitats, such as oyster reefs, salt marshes, living shorelines, springs, seagrass, and which provides a wide benefit to not only the wildlife and the ecology, but also to a wide range of stakeholders. She serves in a leadership role for the Northeast Florida Estuarine Restoration Team. And those restoration teams, both the East Central and the Northeast, and they're throughout the state of Florida, are a network of practitioners collaborating towards large scale and strategic habitat restoration. So a really great coordination throughout the state on habitat restoration. And both Annie and Julie are integral members of that effort. She was awarded Scientist of the Year in 2020 by FWC's Division of Habitat and Species Conservation. Annie holds a BS in Marine Science and Biology from the University of Miami and a Master of Resource Management and Fisheries from Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, British Columbia. So with that, Annie is a Florida native and is delighted to still be exploring in the mud all these years later. So with that, I am going to end my screen sharing, and just a minute, and we're gonna let Annie take over.
All right,
Okay.
Thanks, Vincent, and thanks, Lisa, for hosting us today. I'm gonna get set up here with my screens. You should be able to see the presentation now.
Looks great.
All right. So again, thanks a lot for having us here. I'm gonna sort of take the lead on talking today, but Julie's here with me, and we'll be kind of monitoring the chat. We can talk about some of the questions at the end, or she may be able to provide quick input as we go on the chat. So we're both with the Division of Habitat and Species Conservation with FWC, and specifically Aquatic Habitat Conservation and Restoration section. And I just want to give a quick shout out to our other project managers and colleagues here. Erin McDevitt, she has a similar role down in South Florida, so Palm Beach County down through the Keys. Maria Merrill, who I believe is joining us also today, she's our Manatee Habitat liaison for our group and works statewide, and then Kent Smith, who's our subsection leader. So all of these folks have been really instrumental in getting these projects we're going to talk about today off the ground, and kind of putting together this summary. So today I wanted to share about our response to the unusual mortality event that we've seen in the Indian River Lagoon related to manatees. And it sounds like if you've been tuning into these webinars, you may have gotten a lot more information, a good deep dive on that a little while back. I'll provide a review and then talk about some of the priority projects that our group is implementing to increase and enhance manatee habitat and manatee access to critical areas like warm water refuges. So if you're not familiar, we are currently in a UME, an unusual mortality event related to manatees in the Indian River Lagoon. And this began in December 2020. It's ongoing. And essentially what that means is we're seeing a higher rate than would normally be expected of deaths related to of manatees. And in 2021, that looked like over 1,100 deaths of manatees. And many of those were concentrated in the Indian River Lagoon, and even more specifically in Brevard County. In 2022, so far, as of a week or so ago, we're up to about 683 deaths. So we're still seeing a high number for this point in the year. And the primary cause of these deaths, although not responsible for all of them, but the primary cause it is starvation. And so we're seeing these animals come in, in really low body condition, emaciated, not very much fat on their bodies. And again, this is unusual compared to what we would see in a normal year. So why is this happening? Well, what's going on with these manatees? If you've been around the IRL for the last couple of years, we've been experiencing a series of algal blooms. Here's a picture of one of the brown tide events. And these algal blooms are related to excessive nutrients coming into the system. Those algae just feed on those nutrients. They grow and proliferate very quickly. They block a lot of the sunlight in the water column. And then as they decompose, as they use up those nutrients and run out, that decomposition process takes a lot of oxygen out of the water, and we see these fish kills. So we experienced this quite a bit starting in 2009, and then we saw several years of different types of blooms, brown tide, blue-green algae. We've had a couple years that have been fairly clear more recently, but this is still an issue that we're seeing around the lagoon. So this sort of cycle of excessive nutrients coming into the waterway, dense algal blooms, and as that algae decomposes, we see these fish kills. And again, when that algae really blooms and is in really dense concentrations, it effectively shuts off the light for seagrass below. So the lagoon is a shallow, consistent estuary, and seagrass on the bottom needs sunlight. It's a vascular plant. It needs sunlight just like the plants in your yard or inside your home. And so what we saw was a dramatic decrease in seagrass coverage. This is a figure from Lori Morris's recent paper with the Water Management District. She and Lauren Hall oversee the long-term seagrass surveys from the district, and recently released this paper in Frontiers. And if you focus first on the green bars, this shows you our hectares of coverage of seagrass across the lagoon. So starting with our 1943 aerial imagery, it was fairly consistent through the mid-2000s. And then when we started seeing those first big blooms in 2009, that decline began. And we had a little bit of recovery a few years later, and then it's dropped since. This graph goes to 2019, but the last couple of years continue this downward trend. So that just shows how much of the bottom of the lagoon has seagrass on it. So we're going from about 30,000 to 32,000 hectares down to 14,000 or so in more recent years. But also, it's important to focus on this blue dashed line and the red dashed line show within those existing beds, what's the cover that's there. So not only has the total size of seagrass coverage decreased, but within what's remaining, it's gotten more sparse. And so what we're seeing with that decline is, if you look over on the right side of the axis here, this is sort of our percent cover within the bed. So in those mid-2000s, the Water Management District data show that we're sitting around, 25% cover within the bed, and that's really dropping to below 5%. So not only have we lost acres, but within the acres that are left, it's much more sparse. And this seagrass provides a really critical habitat to a lot of organisms in the lagoon. It's an important nursery area, but also it's forage for a lot of these manatees. And so we're seeing this lag effect of not having this seagrass available for manatees that live in the Indian River Lagoon. And when they come out from their warm water refuges in the winter, they're not able to find the food that they're used to. So short term, what has FWC been doing? Well, this past year, FWC worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and big kudos to our imperiled species management group who spearheaded this and put together supplemental feeding trials. And this took place from January through March. About 200,000 plus pounds of produce were provided for manatees using that as a warm water area. And I think it's important to point out that sort of this average pounds per animal per day, this wasn't to fill bellies. This wasn't to open an all-you-can-eat buffet. This was to provide some sustenance to get these animals through that really tough time. We really wanted to save those critical rescue and rehabilitation resources for the animals that truly needed it. This might sound familiar since we've been living through a pandemic the last few years, but those critical hospitalization resources and medical care are limited. And so we want to make sure that the animals that truly need that care can get to it, and that system is not completely overwhelmed. And so that a supplemental feeding trial was to help keep those numbers down and take a little pressure off all of our acute care facilities. There was quite a bit of monitoring involved in that effort. And what we found after those 3 months was there were no negative impacts on water quality. So any material that did not get consumed by the manatees was removed from the system, and there were not any negative impacts on manatee behavior. So that's been closed up since the springtime, since now the waters are warmer and the manatees can get out and move around their normal foraging areas. So long term, that's what we're really going to talk about today. That's what our aquatic habitat conservation and restoration group focuses on. And we know that this is a bigger problem, right? So we want to make sure that there is quality and quantity habitat out there for these animals and other wildlife who use the lagoon. So we're working on things like ensuring that the manatees have access to their warm water refuges, restoring forage areas, but also just taking a multi-habitat holistic approach to restoration. We know that oysters and mangroves and salt marshes, they all have an important role to play in the health of these estuarine systems and providing habitat for all of the organisms that utilize the lagoon. So we'll talk today about how we're taking this sort of multi-habitat approach for manatee habitat restoration. This past year, our group was provided $8 million in general revenue through Senate Bill 2500, directly in response to this unusual mortality event. So this was separate from our normal project budget, and it had a specific intent to say, look, this money is for making sure those manatees have access to their springs and that we're providing habitat restoration in manatee concentrated areas. So that does give us some leeway to make sure we're putting the money where we can have a lot of impact for these animals. And as always, the money comes with some sideboards and some guide rails for us. So the funding was specifically for construction projects. We want to create tangible, on the ground habitat benefits. It needs to be encumbered by the end of 2022, so coming right up in a couple more months. This should all be competitively procured, as we usually do through state purchasing. And we have a couple of years for project completion, typically a 3 to 5 year timeframe once we get these projects rolling. This is a huge benefit for our group. We're often working on annual budgets. And so these sort of more short-term timeframes, and especially when you're doing large-scale multi-habitat projects, having several years to take a more adaptive approach, to have different phases, to work on feasibility and engineering and then construction has really enabled us to tackle some of these bigger projects that are going to have a big impact in the lagoon. So this was very exciting for us when we found out about it a little over a year ago, but we knew we couldn't do this on our own. We really needed help from a lot of the partners who are already doing good work in the IRL. Again, if you've been tuning into the Water Ambassador program, you know there's a lot of great work happening in the IRL and folks who are tackling these issues from different sides, either stormwater projects, habitat projects, septic to sewer conversions, and more. So we reached out to our partners and said, okay, what does everybody have going on? Where can we expand? Where can we support this effort, this work? How can we make these efforts bigger and better to have a positive impact. So that was July of 2021. We had over 110 participants in this workshop that we held to, again, really understand what restoration projects were, poised to make a big impact and sort of ready to get off the ground within this time frame and would fit the criteria. We talked about 16 projects during this workshop, and we really narrowed it down to 7 priority projects. And so these priority projects, were based on things like, do they fit the goal? Do they enhance manatee foraging habitat? Do they provide safe access to warm water refuges? And do they take a multi-habitat approach where possible? Are they feasible, and are they scalable? So how ready are we? Sometimes some of the projects were more of a, what we really would like to do, but there were a few steps still to get through for feasibility and scalability. And these priority projects were much closer to implementation readiness and just needed a little bit of extra lift that we could provide. So that also gave us some backup projects, just in case some of these weren't as ready as we thought or fell through for whatever reason. And we felt really good coming away from that workshop with a suite of projects that would cover different areas of the IRL, different warm water springs access, and fit our goals, and support work that our partners are already doing. So those 7 priority projects are what I'm going to share with you all today. We're just going to go into them a little bit, and if you need more details, we can chat afterwards, but I'll just give a brief overview of each of those projects. That some are already rolling, some are getting very close, so we're excited to get a lot of this off the ground right now. As we started talking about seagrass restoration in the IRL, the question kept coming up: do we even have the material available for large-scale seagrass outplanting or transplanting projects? And there was a lot of concern among partners that, no, we need more material available to really make a big difference with outplanting projects. So the first priority project that we have here is the Seagrass Nursery Network. So we're supporting several partners: the Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute, which already has a seagrass nursery, and Florida Oceanographic Society, which already has a seagrass nursery. But then also some other locations: University of Central Florida, the Florida Bass Conservation Center, who will be doing some freshwater SAV propagation, and really helping these organizations either expand their existing nurseries or get one off the ground so that they can be growing out this material in a nursery environment, and will be ready for bigger outplanting projects. The situation in the IRL, has gotten to the point where we don't want to take donor material from within the existing healthy beds in the IRL and put that additional stress on them. This allows us to take fragments that have washed up along the shore, and grow them out in the nursery system and get that material back out into the lagoon. So it's less of an impact on the natural system that's there. It also allows for multiple locations for sourcing and preservation of genetic diversity throughout the IRL. So the seagrass that's up in the northern IRL may have some slight genotypic differences than seagrass in the southern region. And so having multiple nurseries growing out seagrass from different areas will allow us to maintain that genetic diversity and just increase our capacity in general. At the same time, the IRL National Estuary Program is funding a similar effort. They have several other partners that we don't have, and there's a little bit of overlap, but we feel like these are really good complementary efforts to make sure that there is plenty of material available and that these partners are well connected and can learn from each other, and sort of maintain this network and troubleshoot together, make sure that we're addressing research questions and issues as they come up. So right now, the status of this is we are, wrong way. We're finalizing our contracts with Harbor Branch and Florida Oceanographic. We do have an agreement in place with the University of Central Florida. They should start constructing their nursery in the next couple of months. And then the Florida Bass Conservation Center hatchery in Rich Loam, again, they'll be growing out eelgrass, so there's a freshwater species. Also an important manatee foraging food. They're undergoing their engineering and design phase to add that eelgrass nursery to their fish hatchery. So our total budget for all of this is about $570,000. FPL is also contributing about $250,000 to Harbor Branch and the continued operation of that nursery system. The next project is our Satellite Beach IRL restoration project. So the city of Satellite Beach completed 1 acre of seagrass, oyster, and clam habitat, all co-located together. And they learned a lot during that process. And so the next phase that we're funding is feasibility for scaling this up. So can we do this, say, at a 10-acre scale? What would that look like? And so we're working with our continuing services contractors to come up with a design, do the bathymetry, the permitting, and really get us ready for construction of this multi-habitat co-located resource setup at a larger scale in the city of Satellite Beach. So that is that project is the resource surveys should be completed quite soon. We're expecting final design to be done by spring of 2023, and then permits secured by about this time next year for construction. So again, this funding is not specifically for construction, but just for getting us staged up and ready for that construction. So we'll be seeking funding for construction along the way. The IRL clam and seagrass restoration project. So many of you may have heard of the super clams in the IRL, and the University of Florida's Whitney lab, Dr. Todd Osborne, has been breeding out clams that he found in the Indian River Lagoon in areas that were hit especially hard by a lot of these algal blooms. So these are super clams that have survived quite an onslaught of water quality issues. And he's been breeding those clams out and then repatriating that stock back into the IRL. So we know they're hardy, we know they're native, and we're just trying to facilitate that recovery and supplement that population and get some natural spawning of those native populations in the IRL. So to date, there's been about 92 million clams released. That includes a lot of clam larvae released into the IRL. And this FWC funding will provide 12 million additional native clams and 3,500 seagrass mats co-located with those clams in various locations through the IRL. So we're working right now with Florida Oceanographic and the Whitney Lab to develop, really outline what sites are we going to put these clams and seagrass at, and sort of what's our time frame over the next few years. So in total, we expect about 6 acres of clam bed habitat. Again, that combination of clams and seagrass will get multiple types of habitat, improve water quality, increase filtration, and available forage. So we will be protecting those resources for a short period of time initially, just to get them all established. But we're really looking forward to working with a number of partners to get these materials out through the IRL in the next few years. That's estimated to be about a 3-year project at the tune of $2 million. In Mosquito Lagoon, there's an excellent history of living shoreline and oyster reef restoration. Canaveral National Seashore has been working with University of Central Florida and other partners. And so we're building on that success and, again, adding seagrass as a component. So in total, this project will cover just shy of 2 acres and include about 5,000 feet of living shoreline, about a half an acre of oyster reef habitat, and then also some seagrass co-located in areas that will support it. So this is an important area with in terms of ecological and cultural resources. And so a lot of the work there has been especially focused on preserving those cultural resources with engineering with nature practices. And again, there's been a lot of success there, a lot of long-term monitoring of these efforts, and we're looking forward to supporting that into the future. So the estimated budget for that project is $800,000. We are nearing completion on that contract, and work will begin as soon as we have completed that contract. And we expect outplanting to start in spring of next year, and that will be another 3-year project. In Bonefish Cove, this is farther south at the in Palm Beach County. Palm Beach County is leading efforts to do a 36.5-acre multi-habitat project. And we are providing some funding to cap muck with sand to create some suitable seagrass habitat as part of this project. So overall, the project includes mangrove, salt marsh, oyster, and shorebird nesting with this island you can see here in the bottom right. These are some of the different habitats you can see, and our funding will help provide some of that seagrass habitat around the base of the islands. This has been a successful technique used by Palm Beach County in a number of locations. So again, we're looking forward to supporting this large-scale multi-habitat project. We expect construction on that project to be completed by summer of next year. No, I'm sorry, summer of 2024. I apologize. So now we're moving away from the IRL a little bit. These are our warm water springs access projects. We have 2. One is Volusia Blue Spring. So this is a really critical warm water habitat off the St. Johns River. It's a first magnitude spring, and we can have up to 700 manatees a day in there in the winter seeking shelter from the cold river water. And that number has been growing every year for the past few decades. So we expect that number to continue growing. It's a state park, Blue Spring State Park, and they've been experiencing quite a bit of erosion and bank collapse along the spring run. It's about 0.4 of a mile, and then within the head spring. So this is an issue. It increases sedimentation within the spring. And it also potentially blocks access for these animals to get to that warm water site. There's also safety concerns for visitors and wildlife. So FWC has been working with DEP, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Coastal Program, Save the Manatee Club on this for the past couple of years. We've completed phase 1 and phase 2 of bank stabilization. And so this UME funding will provide support for phase 3. So phase 3 is going to be an area of the head spring and a few areas of the spring run bank that were not able to be addressed in phase 1 and phase 2. And again, we're using living shorelines, engineering with nature techniques to stabilize the banks and provide safe access for wildlife and for the visitors who use this area. So the engineering and design for phase 3 is currently underway, and we'll be putting it out to bid for construction this fall. And we will begin construction next spring after manatee season is over and the manatees can safely move out into the St. Johns River. This project's estimated budget is about $500,000. Down in Southwest Florida, another springs access project. This is Warm Mineral Springs. Again, an important refuge area in the winter for these animals. But over the years, there's been quite a bit of sedimentation in the spring run, and the manatees are having a tough time getting all the way up to the spring. There's some certain bottleneck areas. This project is currently underway. We anticipate about 6 acres of restored spring run habitat. We're basically digging out these overly sedimented areas and just making sure that that passageway for wildlife is open and safe, but also that we're not altering the overall hydrology of the system. So that project will be wrapped up by mid-November when the manatee season begins and the manatees will be needing to move in there. So again, that one is underway for $2.5 million, and we should be wrapping that up in the next month or so. So the main takeaways that I hope you got from this are, again, that we think a lot of these habitats are really important for manatee health, system health, wildlife health in the Indian River Lagoon and throughout the state. we didn't want to spend this $8 million completely on just outplanting seagrass. Number one, we didn't have the material available. And number two, the issue is bigger than that. And so the solution is bigger than that. We're tackling seagrass, but also oysters, clams, living shorelines, warm water access, salt marsh projects. We really want to make sure that we're looking at the whole system and different parts of the IRL and beyond when talking about manatee habitat restoration. These were the 7 priority projects for this UME funding. Our team also has our additional habitat projects, so you may hear other things that we have going on, but this was specifically to cover the projects that we're funding with that UME money. That's for manatees. We also do all kinds of other fun things, but just to give you a taste of that suite of projects. One of the challenges of this funding is that it doesn't allow for long-term monitoring. We can monitor these projects as long as we are doing them. We can evaluate, how things are working. We can adaptively manage as we go. But once that project is completed, that legislative funding does not allow for extended long-term monitoring. So we are looking for partnerships with that. We've been working with Sea Grant and other folks to look at options for seagrass restoration monitoring, a citizen science program, and really helping the community get out and take some ownership over some of this restoration work and see how it's filling in and growing and all of the benefits. So again, all of our projects will be encumbered by the end of this calendar year, and then we have a couple of years from that time frame to complete them. But some of them will be wrapped up sooner, like Warm Mineral Springs will be finished this year, as an example. So there's been an incredible collaborative effort within the Indian River Lagoon to tackle the loss of seagrass and the nutrient issues. I think you all have heard a lot about different ways we've seen that through this webinar series. And yeah, I hope that sort of starts painting the picture about this, bigger collective approach to seagrass restoration. It's not just replanting it, it's much bigger. There's a lot to tackle. So, we're really supportive of that strategic, large scale, system-wide restoration approach. It really excited to get some of these big projects off the ground as part of that bigger picture. So I'm going to wrap up so that we have some time for questions. Again, Julie is here to answer some questions. She manages several of these projects. I believe Maria is still on. She manages one or two of these. And so hopefully we can answer all of your questions. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you so much, Annie, for that great presentation. Fantastic overview. While you all are typing out your questions, I'm going to launch the poll, and we do have our first question, and it's a long one, so bear with me as I read this. Chandler, oh, did you say something, Vincent?
Lisa, I just wanted to also mention, I didn't say it earlier to the live audience here, if you have any questions, feel free to, we'll go through them kind of in order, and let me know if you have any questions. I can repeat them over the loudspeaker here as well. Thanks, Lisa.
Okay, great. So Chandler writes, you mentioned Senate Bill 2500 provided funding for habitat restoration in areas of high manatee density with considerable habitat loss. Do you see the remaining manatee populations crowding into the same high quality habitat areas with finite food and space like Blue Springs and Volusia? And is there a need to restore habitat in lower density manatee habitat to help alleviate the burden on some of the more common manatee habitat areas around the state?
Yeah, Chandler, this is a great question, and it's one that we are thinking about. So Vincent mentioned in the introduction, but I work in marine estuarine, but also freshwater systems. And so Volusia Blue Spring is, one of the areas I work in. And you're right, we do expect that as habitat conditions change in some of these different manatee use areas, the manatees may change their, their sort of home range, and that there may be pressure on some of these other regions. As I understand it, our FWC manatee folks are really just starting to look at all of the different mark recapture and tagging efforts that have been put in place by different partners around the state and in the region, to understand how much overlap is there in these populations, how much the animals move around year to year, how much regional fidelity is there. We know that there is some regional fidelity, but we do expect that, like Volusia Blue may see more pressure in the coming years. So there is a working group, a Blue Spring working group, made up of invasive plant managers, manatee folks, aquatic habitat people, and this is an issue we've been talking about for several years. One of the solutions that we have been working on there is there's a plant treatment moratorium in that region. So during the manatee season, and now actually extended a bit on either side of manatee season, we don't treat any invasive plants within that system. And this covers most of Lake George and a lot along the St. Johns River. So we want to make sure that there is plenty of food available. We know manatees will eat water lettuce and hyacinth and some of these other plants that we would normally treat. And so, that's been an adaptation in management to make sure that there's accessible food for all of those animals. And we evaluate every year how much food is available. Is it enough? Do we need to have the moratorium be longer? Those kinds of things. So yes, we're thinking about that, and certainly knowing that some of the smaller springs, especially around like Silver Glen and Willaca area, may eventually need to support more animals. And so what would that look like? Maria, if you're on and want to speak to this at all, you may have more insight to share, not to put you on the spot.
Hey, Annie, I think you addressed it, unless there's any follow-up questions. Thank you.
And Annie, I think I would add too, I guess, we obviously only mentioned a few of the projects that we're involved with, but there are a lot of other projects that are being done simultaneously, just right there, right here in Martin County. We have the FOS nursery that we're kind of working on, but with that, Martin County, their ecosystem services staff had received a grant to actually do some seagrass transplantation work. So I think, you're going to see lots of efforts, little efforts, maybe, it's kind of scattered throughout all the different manatee habitats. So, it's definitely kind of focused on those initially higher, like you said, quality habitats. But I think as time has gone on, we realize that pretty much it's important to kind of cover habitat is in many places as we can. So.
Great, thank you all. Vincent, do you have any questions from the live audience?
Any questions? No?
I promised Annie lots of great questions, so of course you all are being quiet today.
Instead, you all were great at asking questions.
I added one question. I just put, would you be willing to come back next year or beyond that and present on the progress of some of these projects?
Yes, definitely. As I mentioned, some of these are multi-year projects and will be kind of adapting as we go. Seagrass outplanting is kind of a new type of restoration in the IRL. So we're all going to be learning a lot in the next few years, and again, sharing with each other and collaborating on, how can we keep doing this bigger and better? And so, yes, I think this webinar is a great tool for that. We'd be happy to. I'm volunteering us already, Julie.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will say too that Annie and I were fortunate enough to go up last month to attend the World Seagrass Conference and International Seagrass Biology Workshop up in Annapolis, Maryland. And it was great for us to kind of see kind of what's happening elsewhere in the country, but also in the world. And it was somewhat, I guess, comforting a little bit to see that, there are a lot of areas that are having the same problems here. So it seems like we're, in some areas we're kind of further along as far as like monitoring and long-term monitoring data available and stuff like that. But like Annie said, everyone's kind of on this forefront for transplantation. So there are definitely a lot of groups and efforts underway to kind of share all that information.
And Terry asks, can you explain what seagrass monitoring by community volunteers would entail? It's just kind of a TBD.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I can provide a little, and then, Lisa, you may want to chime in on this too. So, Terry, you may or may not be familiar with the water management district's long-term surveys. They're quite extensive on the ground surveys. They're looking at things like percent cover of seagrass within a 1 meter squared quadrat across fixed transects. So that means they're looking at the same sites every, twice a year, and they're looking at percent cover of algae within that meter, percent cover of seagrass, how tall is the seagrass, what type is it, how much growth is on the seagrass itself. And so they are very extensive. And we think that for restoration projects, we could implement a scaled back version of that, because really we want to know, is it still there? Has it grown? Has it expanded? How dense is it? Is it the same species that we planted, or other things moving in? So we're working with partners like Sea Grant to think about, how could we implement a community science version of, just checking in on these restoration projects on a more frequent basis, and really evaluating how they're growing in over time and what's happening. So, Lisa, do you want to add anything?
No, I think just that, we are looking at adapting existing citizen science seagrass monitoring programs for restoration activities. So that's something that hasn't previously been done and will require, a different set of criteria and methodologies. But if you're comfortable in the water, if you are interested in sort of committing to at least, a couple times a year, getting in the water and visiting, the same location, and learning the methodologies, then reach out to either me or Vincent, and we can either connect you with an existing monitoring program. Rosemary just said Florida Oceanographic Society has one. You could do in Martin County, or perhaps one of the restoration activities that we're hoping to work on FWC with. I think we're going to try and get Satellite Beach as being the first project that maybe we work on with you all. So we'll see. Just get in touch. Chip asks, is there a single site where one can go to see a map and database of what SAV restoration projects are planned, ongoing, completed, beyond just FWC, but including counties, water management districts, and other jurisdictions along the East Coast?
That's a great question, Chip. The best resource I can point you to, at least for the Indian River Lagoon, would be the IRL Council's website. So it's onelagoon.org. And they really try to compile all of this different water quality, SAV, oysters, living shoreline, all of these different efforts happening within the lagoon. Statewide, I don't know. Open to if anybody else on this call has some good resources.
I mean, we have our, map that we have, our projects that we've been working on, but, they're kind of just the ones that we've been involved with, either the primary or as a partner. But, it's something that I think Annie and I and the others have talked about as something that's needed. And like Annie said, with the IRL NEP, they're at least kind of working to pull together all of the stuff that's being done, within their jurisdiction or their area. So that will be covered. Our Wildlife Research Institute on the West Coast, they do a lot of work, obviously throughout the state. So we do have like a GIS, seagrass layer for those that aren't aware of that. But as far as like restoration projects or something goes, that's something we can, kind of talk about and figure something out to incorporate the statewide aspect of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's probably an aspirational it's a goal, I think, to kind of have a clearinghouse for these kinds of projects. I do have one question that was sent to me. So it's from Arthur. The question he has is, what impact has the UME had on the rest of the manatee population? Is there an increased birth rate of remaining manatees? Impact on population genetics?
Good question. We're not manatee biologists, so I'm gonna provide a little bit of what I know, but I think our imperiled species management folks could probably answer that better. From what I do understand, in the Indian River Lagoon, the birth rate has been quite low through the UME. The animals are stressed and, you know, not producing a lot of animals. In the Blue Spring population, the animals that are using more of the St. Johns River, their birth rate has been quite high the last few years. So they've had a lot of successful calves, a lot of successful first-time moms, which is somewhat unusual, and their population is growing. And again, how much overlap there is, I'm not entirely sure. Other parts of the state I'm less familiar with. Maria, I don't know if you have any insight here, but I think a lot of it is TBD. You know, this UME is still ongoing. And so what the full impacts are to the population may still be yet to be seen. Thanks, Julie. She just put some information on the UME in the chat.
Yeah, that's our website that has all the UME information, and it kind of, you know, goes through and provides answers to the frequently asked questions and some other data that, you know, and updates kind of as we move into this next season, what could be taking place and what the efforts will be. So.
Sorry, I can't type and talk at the same time. I also put in the link to the webinar that we hosted about the unusual mortality event. So that should also provide some additional background information. We have a few more minutes if anyone has any other questions. Otherwise, in the meantime, I want to thank Annie again and Julie for this fantastic and really timely presentation. And we're looking forward to inviting you back. And for all of our water ambassadors, we hope you join us for our last webinar of 2022. And if you're around next week and want to join us for our field trip, that would be great as well. The registration links for both are in the chat. And you have received a lot of thanks and great presentation acknowledgement in the chat, both of you. So thank you for that. If you don't mind maybe sticking around 1 or 2 more minutes just to see if we get any last minute questions.
Sure.
Sure. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Annie and Julie. And yes.
I just wanted to know if you could put those links on the screen.
Yes. So I'm going to move the chat over to our lot on the large screen so our live audience can see those. I'll make that a little bit bigger.
If you've, those of you who are live, if you give Vincent your email address, we can send you all of those links in an email as well. So you don't have to handwrite them. It's a lot of random letters and numbers.
Yeah, I can email those out to you as well. Yeah, I'll do that as soon as I got your information. I'll send those links out.
And I don't know if Terry Mott is still on here, but yes, it sounds like she's in Brevard, and she mentioned obviously the Satellite Beach project. And so the city of Satellite Beach has been very instrumental in utilizing their volunteers. And so I know you can kind of stay tuned for definitely more opportunities as they, we get to the construction portion of the phase. So we can, and if you want to, reach out, Jennifer White is the one who's kind of working on the project from the city side. So she can kind of plug you in with some volunteer opportunities that they might have.
I'm still on. Thank you very much. I'll get with Jennifer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your interest.
Okay, well, not seeing any more questions, I want to thank you again for a great presentation and thanks all of you for joining in to the Water Ambassador Program. Usually takes us about a week to get the webinar, the recording link uploaded onto the website, but thanks. And we look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks for our last Water Ambassador Program.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks,
Annie. Thanks,
everybody.
Julie.
Yeah,
Thank you,
everybody. Have a
guys.
good
Thanks for
afternoon.
having us.
And Annie, I think I'm long overdue in sending you an email about island seagrass. So this is a
It's
good
okay. I don't-
reminder that.
I know. Carolyn
need to.
reminded me like a month ago and I was like, oh yeah. And
I know we did our training and it was like on my to-do list and then.
it's
obviously lapsed.
September.
I know.
It's
So I will send an email to the whole team and hopefully we can reconnect soon.
okay, awesome. Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
I'm interested to hear how you guys' training went and kind of what your thoughts are. And I think our timing is going to be good. We have a little time before we're going to be doing any big outplanting. So
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the big takeaway from the training is that all of the programs are adapted to their local situation and there is no single protocol. So as long as we keep things, consistent with what you need and capable for the volunteers, that we can sort of modify protocols accordingly.
okay. I think the other thing to think about will be we do have some internal money if we need funding to get it off